Magic.
Love it. There's your boy Hagen in the background. Looks like he's doing okay with that smallpox deck.
Yeah, he won 6-3 on day 1, but looks like so far so good on day number 2. Actually, that's Jeremy Bertarioni.
Oh, my bad.
It's just a couple nerds with glasses.
Couple of nice jaw-lined, dark rim glasses with the same haircut white guys.
Mm-hmm. It's very easy to confuse any number of people that fit that description.
All right. Well, looks like we're both underway here. Both players have mulliganed to 5, so this might be a bit of a scrum, if you will.
Arkham's Astrolabe for Fear. Collins started on Prismatic Vista. And here's a Mishra's Bauble for Fear. Collins is asking if he can draw his card. He can. Fear is going to wait to look at a card when the information's more useful. Maybe wants to keep the Bauble for Metalcraft too. Collins now going to go find an island off of the Vista.
Between these two players, I think if they're both on a mulligan to 5, my money's going to be on Harlan, just because his deck seems to operate on low resources pretty well. A lot of things kind of cycle and get him to the more important stuff. And like he has a lot of these kind of virtual 2-for-1s or must kills. And with Collins' main form of removal being Path to Exile, you have to imagine something like Goblin Engineer or Urza Lord High Artificer is going to require that type of an answer and give him the extra mana that he needs.
See Fear fetching for a second snow-covered island. Goes to 18 off of that. Goblin Engineer deployed. Collins catches that with Mana Leak.
Catch me outside.
Another Glacial Fortress for Collins. Now has 3 mana.
Did you know that she's like a millionaire now?
Yeah. Unfortunately, that is true, and I was aware of it. Fear's going to take a look at the top card of Collins' deck with the Bauble, draws 2 cards in his turn. There's an Urza in hand, a little shy on the mana for that.
Can't quite get Urza on the battlefield this turn. Has an Ensnaring Bridge, might want to just go ahead and pop it off, but attacking might be his easiest route to victory this game with that Urza in hand.
Land number 4 for Collins. This is a 2 Cryptic Command deck.
Yeah, 2 Cryptic Commands, does have access to 2 copies of Jason the Mind Sculptor as well. It's like we're going to deploy one of them here. And that is from one of probably an SDCC promo from a while back. Looks like it's a much darker shade than normal.
This is the new Mythic Edition.
Oh.
Collins got that instead of a foil War of the Spark sheet. He'll be brainstorming with the Jace. That one didn't land. You seen this? Heard about this?
Yeah, I got a full sheet.
I got a toothbrush.
I got a full sheet. Wait, what do you mean you got a toothbrush? I don't get it.
Literally, I'll explain it to you later.
Okay, so I got a full War of the Spark sheet. It's currently in a tube. I have not checked to see if it is damaged in any way, which I probably should have done because I heard multiple people's were damaged. Anyway, Jason Mind Sculptor sticks. Austin Collins here. Not going to have a free answer to this Urza Lord High Artificer, but Jason Mind Sculptor can mitigate it somewhat with a minus on the token that Urza creates. And if he has a removal spell for it, can make sure that the fast mana ability doesn't do too much either.
So there's the Urza. Harlan immediately uses the Construct to cast a Chromatic Star. Back over to Austin Collins, now untapping with Jason the Mind Sculptor.
That's always a good feeling. Get into untap with arguably the most powerful Planeswalker of all time. Has a shuffle effect too with that Field of Ruin if he wants it.
He'll minus on the Jace to bounce the Construct. The Urza only has 1 power, so Fear can't clean up with that alone. But the Urza will attack the Jace.
If I'm Harlan here, I'm going to start spending a bit, I think, to activate the Urza, get some value. Now, I just want to point out, some of these kids need to learn that when your deck is already shuffled, even if a card says shuffle on it before doing a thing, you don't technically have to. If a card is known in any form or fashion, you do need to shuffle. But it was like an old Mind's Desire shortcut back in the day.
Old man Anderson thinks you shuffle too much.
That is true.
You kids and your shuffling.
Have you seen Ross Merriam shuffle? He's not a kid. He's 30.
Get out of my feature match area. That neighbor guy, Miriam, always shuffling. Steam Vents found.
Notably played it untapped instead of tapped, threatening something here.
Field of Ruin will just target that Steam Vents. Fear known for playing a lot of basic lands. How many does he have this weekend? You see 7 in a lot of these decks. He has 6.
Okay. That's a pretty high number, but you do need a reasonable amount of snow-covered basics in your deck just to be able to consistently cast Arkham's Astrolabe. You can't afford to play too many of those utility lands / shock lands to go along with your fetches.
He finds snow-covered Swamp. Collins finds a Plains. Like the spread on basics for Collins.
Yeah, a little unglued, a little unhinged.
Some foil, some not. Just get the full experience.
I bet one of the Glacial Fortresses is like M10 and the other one's like M13 or whatever.
It's a Brainstorm with that Jace.
It's going to help them dig for answers to the Urza proper. It is currently not the hugest threat in the world, but the ability to activate it every turn and get a free card off the top can potentially help him find some pieces to the infinite combo that his deck can assemble with Thopter Foundry, Sword of the Meek, and Urza.
The ability to attack for 1 against 1 loyalty Jace, also of some consequence.
Right, so he does need to find some way to either block or kill or bounce this Urza so that the Jace the Mind Sculptor sticks around, but that's not a tall order exactly. Stoneforge Mystic here with 2 toughness can do it. Spell Queller with 3 toughness can flash in and block.
Collins does not seem thrilled about the situation. He's resolved the Brainstorm now. Here's Path to Exile, so the Urza's off the table. Harlan will find basic land number 4, or 5 rather. He already has the mountain as well. So just 1 snow-covered island left in the deck for basics.
I believe there was a main phase on this from Collins because he didn't want Harlan to get the extra activation of the Urza on upkeep. I believe Urza allows you to play the card until the end of the turn. And even though he does give Harlan an extra mana though, so it's a bit of a awkward interaction there.
It is until end of turn, you're right about that. Fear is going to deploy a Thopter Foundry. That'll get caught by Spell Snare. And here's that backup Urza, but Spell Queller catches that.
Alrighty, well, Harlan was kind of baiting with the Thopter Foundry in hopes that it did get countered so that he could stick that Urza through a shields down, no cryptic command once that 1 mana was spent. But unfortunately for him, that Spell Queller doing some serious work right now. And if he is able to pair this up with one of those swords that he does have in his deck, the Sword of Fire and Ice, could do a large amount of damage this turn.
And Fear's deck has a rough go of removing Spell Queller. There's 2 Galvanic Blasts in the main, but he only has 2 artifacts.
Right. Could maybe draw some combos like Arkham's Astrolabe into Galvanic Blast to be able to deal with it, but as far as what's on the table at the moment, doesn't quite have it.
Collins will Brainstorm again. Queller connects for 2, Feared 12.
I cannot imagine that Harlan has a chance of winning this game now that Jace has survived for, 3 or 4 turns now? It's a tall order.
He'll sacrifice his Chromatic Star looking for something. Found Sword of the Meek, but that Thopter Foundry's in the graveyard. You want that order reversed.
Right, and it's a little awkward. The Ensnaring Bridge does kind of shut down the Spell Queller and all these other attackers, but when your opponent just has a Jace the Mind Sculptor on the battlefield already, it doesn't really matter. They can just win with that if they want to.
And Collins has plenty of stuff to do. He actually Force of Negations the Ensnaring Bridge. Fury gets to resolve Sword of the Meek, but that just doesn't do anything.
Yeah, it is technically an equipment, so he could put it on an Urza or whatever later, but it only really works when you have Thopter Foundry on the battlefield already.
Now back to Austin Collins. Another turn of untapping with Jace the Mind Sculptor.
Now Collins may go after the top of the deck from Harlan. Looks like that's what he's going to do. Decides to put it on bottom. Must have been a goodie.
Attack with the Queller, Fear to 10. Collins will pass.
Normally when your opponent stops brainstorming with Jace and starts to tick up, that generally means you've lost.
Yes. You've lost, or they've made a minor error, because that's still pretty good even if they're not brainstorming.
Yeah. Or they're trying to get the game over quickly because of time constraints, but with 40 minutes on the clock, that cannot be the case.
The Spell Queller will close at some point. Fear now at 8 from that attack. Plus on the Jace lets Fear keep a card. That's the worst.
Yeah, and normally you want to have an uncracked fetch land on the battlefield in order to prevent that kind of thing from happening, but Harlan here has gone through plenty of those already.
And it was just the last basic land drawn last turn. The Jace now going to 7 as Fear was attacked down to 6 by the Queller. Another card left on top. Ichor Wellspring. It's a redraw. Assuming it resolves. It does, so Fear gets to draw. Mishra's Bauble.
Cycles, but it's a slow cycle. Could potentially hit a Galvanic Blast on this turn cycle with it, though.
Back over to Austin Collins. Very close to closing with that Spell Queller.
Harlan just on 6 life. A single Sword of Fire and Ice would kill him this turn. A Stoneforge Mystic getting the Sword of Fire and Ice also wins this turn. Now, this is a weird spot. Collins might actually brainstorm in order to look for a Stoneforge Mystic because that does win the game in the spot. He goes for it. Let's see if he hit.
It's pretty unlikely for him to lose even if he doesn't find it.
Yeah, that's definitely true as well.
Land was such a colonnade. That'll be lethal next turn as the Spell Queller knocks Fear to 4.
Now, Harlan definitely looking for a combo of cards here because I don't think a single Top Deck Foundry has a chance of resolving. So the Mishra's Bauble's got to do some serious work here.
So Fear takes a look at the top card of Collins' deck. Draws off Bauble, draws for turn. Included Delta we played as the land.
Now, all that's left to go now is Austin Collins activating the Celestial Colonnade and attacking.
So Collins draws rather. Could fire up the Colonnade if he wants to close now. Hard to imagine him losing even over the course of 2 turns attacking with the Spell Queller though. He'll brainstorm with the Jace.
Yeah, it could just be playing it safe, you know. Not attacking with a Colonnade is certainly fine. He does know that these Wurza decks usually play a couple copies of Galvanic Blast, so using all of his mana to attack with a Colonnade here, when he could just hold up like double Counterspell, seems a bit awkward. So
yeah, so he'll just attack with the Spell Queller, Fear out at 2. Shocks for a Hallowed Fountain, does Collins. He's at 16.
Sure, why not?
Fear will draw, might be his last draw step. Yep, he'll pick him up. Austin Collins up a game over Harlan Fear.
Excellently navigated by Collins there. I thought the pluses when he was in a pretty firm position were really smart in order to prevent Harlan from drawing anything of consequence. And then when he had a couple spots where the right draw off the top could actually win the game, does some brainstorms. But ultimately the story of that game was a turn 4 Jason Mind Sculptor never left the battlefield. And if you're playing a kind of fairish deck like Harlan is playing, you know, an unfettered Jason Mind Sculptor is just not it.
Yeah, eventually it just overwhelms you, and it doesn't always take too long. This player's going to look at their sideboards. Harlan Fear has 3 Assassin's Trophies, 3 Ceremonious Rejections, 2 Fatal Push, 2 Collective Brutality, 2 Tezzeret Agent of Bolas, 2 Thoughtseize, and a Damping Sphere.
So if I'm Harlan, I want some wide-range answers as we go late. I like Assassin's Trophy. That allows them to answer those Planeswalkers as well as some of those equipment as the game progresses. It also helps them kill Spell Queller in some weird spots. Fatal Push seems like it could come in as well for similar reasons. Tezzeret Agent of Bolas is a great sideboard card because it allows them to pressure planeswalkers while also threatening to win the game, while also just digging for extra artifacts. And then 2 copies of Thoughtseize can come in because they're a great answer to Stoneforge Mystic, just taking away the card they search up, and you leave them with just a 1/2 that does nothing.
Sideboard for Austin Collins, 3 Timely Reinforcements, 2 Ashiok Dream Renders, 2 Disdainful Stroke, 2 Stony Silence, a Dovin's Veto, a Ceremonious Rejection, a Rest in Peace, a Supreme Verdict, a Celestial Purge, and a Wrath of God.
A couple different ways Collins can approach this matchup. I definitely like the Stony Silences. Those are a no-brainer. Shutting down all the artifacts from Harlan, including Thopter Sword combo is important. Dovin's Veto counters almost every spell in Harlan's deck. I like bringing that in. Ceremonious Rejection is a little worse than it could be because it doesn't counter Thopter Foundry or Urza Lord High Artificer, which are effectively the 2 best cards from Harlan's deck, but they counters basically everything else, so I probably would bring it in. Rest in Peace knocks off all the graveyard synergies between Goblin Engineer, even something as innocuous as Acre Wellspring, but it also just shuts down the Thopter Sword combo, so I don't mind it, but it's not integral. And then I might bring in a Supreme Verdict to clean up some weird post-sideboard stuff that Harlan could be bringing to the table, like going wide with just Thopter Foundry itself and not needing the Thopter Sword combo. The same with the Wrath of God, and then maybe the Celestial Purge, because it does take care of Thopter Foundry, but there aren't a lot of targets.
So these 2 decks, 4-color Urza, Azorius Control, they look to be pretty serious contenders in the new modern format. And if you want to get the insights from some of the best minds in the game, you can go check out some great modern content over on Star City Games Premium. With that premium subscription, you get exclusive content on StarCityGames.com, an ad-free experience, and 5% discount on any SCG purchase. That's sealed products, singles, what have you.
Yeah, and it's one flat, monthly fee, and I think the 5% discount on the SCG stuff alone pays for it. And that, don't quote me on this, but I believe that extends to sealed product as well. So if you just want to get some like old booster packs or whatever, 5% off saves you right then for however much it costs.
Or if you want to get some new booster packs, pre-order some Throne of Eldraine.
Hell yeah. On top of that, though, the exclusive content that Starseed provides is far and away some of the best content on the internet for Magic the Gathering. We recently picked up notable Hall of Famer Paulo Vitor Dama-de-Rosa. His articles have been stellar. I am proud to have him as part of our team. And on top of that, you get content from myself, and that's it. Only those 2. You get the best and the worst.
So you can read more from Paulo and Todd at go.starcitygames.com/premium.
Of course, we have a lot of great writers. Brad Nelson, Sam Black, a number of other notable names from Magic's history, as well as current MPL member. Game 2 here between these 2. Looks like they're about ready to go.
See if we can have some 7 cards hands here. I believe players have kept on 7. They're ready to play. Fear leads on Polluted Delta. Here's Mishra's Bauble. Second Mishra's Bauble. Go to Austin Collins. Tapped Hollowed Fountain. We'll go back to the match. I think there was Mishra's Bauble there. So Harlan targeted himself because he has that uncracked fetch land. Saw one he liked. Drew off the Bauble and drew for turn. Now he'll crack the Polluted Delta. Goes to 19.
Yeah, the Mishra's Bauble plus Fetchland interaction was always one of the draws for the card because it allows you to sculpt your hand a bit for no real mana cost. And on top of that, it works well as a free artifact for artifact-based decks. But traditionally, we're used to seeing it out of those Death Shadow strategies as a way to make Tarmogoyf bigger or turn on Delirium for Traversal Ulvenwald.
So Fear found Watery Grave, went to 17, played a Snow-Covered Island, and had Thopter Foundry because Collins' first land was tapped. Played around a Spell Snare with that one. Nice to have it on the table. Ichor Wellspring is hit by Mana Leak, though, on the following turn.
Yeah, that's a fine tag for the Mana Leak because Ichor Wellspring not only draws a card, but can be sacrificed to the Thopter Foundry to create a 1/1, which could be annoying over the next few turns, while also drawing a second card. So effectively counters a Divination that creates a 1/1 flyer, which is nice.
Polluted Delta was land number 3 for Fear. Could combine that with that Mishra's Bauble, as we see Austin Collins.
Geist.
Glacial Fortress,
Damn.
Teferi Time Raveler. Not quite Geist of St. Traft.
There's no Geist of St. Traft in
It
this
would be
list.
difficult
I did not know. I
would have
guessing.
to intervene if Austin Collins cast that spell.
Well,
be a real circle of protection red situation.
I'd let it play. Wow.
So we see Fear is going to check the bobble and now crack the fetch land. Goes to 16.
I'm just going to let that one go, honestly. Not the cheat. That guy cheated for sure.
Yeah, not let that go. Yeah.
I wonder if he's watching. He's just really mad.
Unlikely. I mean, maybe the second one, but not the first. If Fear will draw off the bobble
really
and draw for turn.
Well, he is tapped out here, so Harlan could, now that he's picked up War of Invention, using the Thopter Foundry and his mana, just go get Sword of the Meek right now, put it on the battlefield, force Austin to have some sort of disenchant effect or a force of negation right now.
Yeah, so here's Wear for 2. And that's Sword of the Meek.
He doesn't have a ton of ways to actually break this up, but a minus on the Teferi can bounce the Thopter Foundry, and he could counter it on the way back down.
So the Foundry is bounced. Teferi down to 2. Collins does have land number 4. It's another Glacial Fortress, and he'll pass with 4 mana up.
Got a full grip, too. So it's looking pretty bad for Harlan. This might not be the best matchup for him. This version specifically from Collins is a bit awkward because not only does he have Spell Queller as a way to apply pressure while also being basically a hard counter in this matchup, but he also has Teferi Time Raveler, and when you combine that with Force of Negation, things get really awkward.
Galvanic Blast took down Teferi. Fear will play Scalding Tarn and pass. End step, Collins will opt. Puts 1 to the bottom. And he'll draw.
And Harlan wants to play around Cryptic Command a bit. Doesn't want to just jam one of his good cards into it. Deciding just to pass here with 4 mana up. Does have an Urza, Lord High Artificer in hand. May want to try to double spell on the next turn if he has a 6th mana source.
Collins plays Plains as land number 5. He knows about the Thopter Foundry in Fear's hand, so he wants to respect that. He'll just pass the turn with 5 mana up.
Finds a Goblin Engineer. That one's pretty good. Gonna bait here with that one.
And you see Fear cast that. Collins has pretty good information about this. He knows about the Foundry already, but the Engineer can still be a problem.
Yeah, Engineer effectively means Foundry at some point, right? Because if you counter the Thopter Foundry, the Engineer can just get it back.
Also, Fear already has that wonky value engine, that Iker Wellspring that was caught by mana leaks in the graveyard, so you can just use the Engineer to keep getting that back.
Right, my guess is Collins has Counterspell and a removal spell for it. Decided to let it resolve. He's going to put a redundant Thopter Foundry in the grave. Collins here, probably going to EOT, kill the Goblin Engineer, continue holding up counterspells for a foreseeable future, would be my guess.
Vendilion Click cast end step.
Okay.
Targets Harlan. We see Assassin's Trophy, that Thopter Foundry, and an Urza.
That hand is terrifying.
What do you take?
I don't know. Probably the Thopter Foundry if you have removal spell for the Engineer. If you don't have anything, just take the best card, which is Urza. I mean, the Thopter Sword combo is super annoying, but he already has it currently on the battlefield with the Goblin Engineer and the Thopter Foundry in the grave. I don't know.
Presumably you just let Fear have the trophy.
I think so. Well, okay. I mean, he might have Rest in, or not, either
could
Rest
have
in
Stony
Peace or,
Silence.
Yeah, Rest in Peace or Stony Silence to shut it down.
So there's Path on Engineer.
Like I said, it's all contextual. So the stuff he takes, he's taken for a reason. Austin is a phenomenal player at such a young age. The decisions he makes almost always have a good reason behind them.
In truth, he'd be a phenomenal player at his skill at old age.
It's true.
Just a phenomenal player.
3-time Invitational top 4. All back to back to back.
Picked up his first open win this year already. Vendilion Click will knock Fear to 13. Collins will play Flooded Strand and pass turn. And see what Fear can do. We know about Thopter Foundry and an Urza in hand.
Harlan's no slouch either. He's had a great year so far. 5 open top 8s. Every open he's played with this Grixis Urza deck, he has top 8'd.
And he knows his way around a blue-white deck, too. He has an open win with Jeskai Control in Modern. The question is, does his deck have the tools he needs to win from here?
Yeah, I think he has the tools. I mean, it all just depends on the wall of counter magic and interaction that Collins has at the ready.
Thopter Foundry cast by Fear. Collins will catch that with the Spell Queller. Now you see Fear fetching to 12, presumably going for that Urza now.
It's perhaps a bit late, but he was trying to find a spot to play 2 spells in 1 turn to overload Collins' defenses, but Collins has hit basically every land drop this game, and it looks like he has the right answer on the right turn at all points. And when that happens, if you're the control deck, it's almost impossible for your opponent to win unless they have some uncounterable haymaker or some hexproof creature that you can't physically interact with.
I see Collins fetching in response. It's going to be Snapcaster Mage and a Path on the Urza before that Construct token shows up.
We're going to float a mana here off of the Sword of the Meek. I don't believe he has anything to do with the mana, but just going through the optimal pacing.
So this is 7 power of creatures and a Celestial Colonnade. So Collins is 1 point shy of lethal with this battlefield. He'd have to deal with the Construct too. Fear didn't have much to do with that mana. I had Chromatic Star plus Mox Opal.
Yeah, Collins here can just attack in the air to get over the Construct token. That'll allow him to deal quite a chunk of damage, 9 I believe, putting him down to 3. And while he's up a game here, he's in a commanding position. Harlan basically out of juice.
Doesn't feel good to be empty-handing, just watching your opponent shuffle 4 cards.
Yeah, I mean, he does have the ability to crack the Chromatic Star and potentially turn that into an actual card next turn, but what he's really hoping for, I think, is for Austin to go for the big attack, tapping out for the most part, putting him to 3, and then having a string of draws off of the Star and the draw step that results in an infinite combo. It's like Urza and either War of Invention or Thopter Foundry.
Here's a tap of 4 for Collins. It's Jace the Mind Sculptor. He'll brainstorm.
I have to imagine he's looking for some stuff like Force Negation to make sure he has the most protection at his disposal as possible. How many Gear per Ether Grids are in Harlan's list? That one could be a nice one. Sometimes they play 1 main, sometimes they play 1 or 2 in the sideboard. Looks like he's not playing any this weekend.
Big donut.
It does only do 1, you know, if you don't have a ton of artifacts, so it's not great in this new Stoneforge Mystic metagame, I suppose. But it would be okay here.
Fear to 7 off the attack with the Flyers. Collins also had an island to follow up, so 3 mana at the ready. Fear's going to try to draw out of things. They'll attack with the Construct. Snapcaster Mage is going to block that to save the Jace.
Galvanic Blast here off the top, as long as Collins doesn't have a removal spell, or a counter spell rather, would be a great hit on the Spell Queller, giving him access to that Thopter Foundry.
Right, here's Galvanic Blast, targets the Queller.
Let's see if Collins has the answer. If he doesn't, this could be really bad for Collins.
Queller's down. And yeah, the Foundry's just back on the table.
And he's still floating that blue mana. So if Collins doesn't have anything here, he can just make a ton of Thopters, gain a bunch of life. It doesn't have to be infinite. What a turn of events. That's the dangerous Spell Queller, though. It's not a permanent counter spell. And after sideboard, Harlan not only has those Galvanic Blasts, but has a couple Fatal Pushes, too.
And if you're actually trying to go for a win, you see him cycle that Chromatic Star there. If you found Urza, you could actually just full combo from here.
Right.
But it's just going to have to settle for making 5 Thopters. Still pretty good.
Yeah, I'll take it. I fear Harlan, you'll take it too.
Right.
The only thing here that can get Collins out of this mess is exactly Stony Silence and then a follow-up Wrath of God or Supreme Verdict.
Collins will brainstorm with Jace. The Jace did not show him what he needed last turn. Yeah, and Collins just has to pick him up.
Boy.
What a comeback from Harlan Fear there.
Sometimes all it takes is one nice top deck, but there it was. Harlan found the Galvanic Blast at just the right time, knocked off that Spell Queller, and unfortunately for Collins, that game was kind of stolen out from under him.
And Fear definitely picked a good spot to 2-spell there. There was some concern when you had that Urza and that Thopter Foundry trying to cast them is really not going to work. Collins knows about your hand. But Fear decides, you know what? This is my last chance. I'm going to cast him. Ends up pulling ahead. Really good navigation.
Yeah, we didn't see a whole lot of Thopter Foundry over the last couple years since its unbanning. Mostly because there wasn't really a great home for it. But there's just been a huge amount of new powerful artifacts printed, as well as Urza Lord High Artificer as well, and it's really jump-started the archetype. And on top of that, it's just a good combo, those two cards. It goes infinite with Urza, but we saw that game and a number of other games. Just Thopter Sword is good enough to win on its own.
The Urza Lord High Artificer, a big hit from Modern Horizons, and if you can believe it, we got a new Magic set on the horizon already.
Ooh.
Throne of Eldraine right around the corner. You can pre-order that today. It ships Friday, October 4th. It'll be in time for Halloween. It looks a little spooky.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always a fan of the spooky sets. My wife and I are into all sorts of horror genres. We love a good scary movie. And Throne of Eldraine looks to be bringing out some of the better horror tropes. At the very least, some cool like dark fantasy type stuff coming out.
Yeah, there's really awesome gingerbread man monster art that's been previewed already. I love that piece.
Have you seen the viral Twitter campaign where they keep sending various content creators gingerbread men?
I have seen that.
Some of them's limbs are broken
They
off.
are missing some limbs. You can check out Throne of Eldraine at go.sorcerygames.com/ELD.
Both players here shuffling up for the pivotal Game 3. Austin Collins going to be on the play. Got to say, that was a really impressive comeback from Harlan that game. Well navigated. I thought that there was a chance that he missed a window to potentially cast a spell. Ultimately, just ran Collins out of resources. Even with a Jace the Mind Sculptor, couldn't quite find that last counter spell or that last piece of protection to keep him from assembling the Thopter Sword combo.
Looks like players have kept on 7 for game number 3. We'll get them underway here. Collins leads on Flooded Strand. Fear leads on Snow-Covered Swamp, and Thoughtseize. Get a look at Collins' hand. See Opt, another Flooded Strand, Cryptic Command, Field of Rune, Mana Leak, and Teferi Time Raveler.
Yeah, at the very least, this will just help him navigate the next few turns or so. So he knows how to play around the Mana Leak, or can take it and then not have to worry about it too much. I doubt he's going to take the Opt because there's a couple of juicy targets for the Thoughtseize already.
Takes Teferi Time Raveler.
I don't hate it. That bounce effect is really annoying. And it makes it so you have to play at sorcery speed, which kind of runs headfirst into all those counterspells.
Definitely felt like it was between Cryptic and Teferi to me. Just the two highest impact cards.
Sure.
See Collins fetching and shocking Frolic Fountain end step. He'll cast that Opt.
I might have just taken, it depends on his hand obviously, but if I had Thopter Foundry in hand, I might just take Mana Leak, just so you can stick a Thopter Foundry on the following turn. Yeah, it's going to get bounced by the Teferi, but then you can just recast it while the shields are down, so I don't know. But it didn't look like he had it. Looks like his hand is pretty reactive. Got his War of Invention, another Thoughtseize, Assassin's Trophy. Picked up an Arkham's Astrolabe for the turn though, so this could be a nice one.
Casts Sword of the Meek. That one you don't care if his mana leaked.
You don't counter that one.
Collins will, of course, not counter that and fetch that Flooded Strand to 16 end step. Finds another Hallowed Fountain, this time tapped.
I gotta say, I'm really enjoying this switch away from Serum Visions to opt out of the Azorius control decks, namely because you want to hold up Spell Snare on the first turn. Spell Snare got a lot better with the unbanning of Stoneforge Mystic, but also just a lot of decks in the format kind of revolve around these really powerful 2-mana threats. Dr. Foundry, Goblin Engineer, Stoneforge Mystic, you know, even just Tarmogoyf are all great cards.
I was so jazzed when they reprinted Opt.
Same. It was maybe it was a bit innocuous, but it still felt cool.
Right, so Collins had land number 3. We see an Astrolabe for Fear. Now we see Collins using a Snapcaster Mage to flashback that Opt. Scry to the bottom, drew off that, now is drawing for turn.
Opt was one of those cards that, it was an invasion block. It was one of the first booster boxes I ever bought when I was 16 or so. And I didn't really get it, you know. I was like, okay, well, why don't I just not pay mana and do the same, you know, just draw my card for the turn.
Well, it was really amusing to me because it's a conversation that I had more than once where somebody asked, you know, because Serum Visions is kind of weak as a cantrip. They said, what can we do? Obviously, Preordain's too powerful to unban. And so, like, can we do anything? And I thought that Opt would be actually too good for Modern, so I was really happy when they actually put it in.
Sure.
Now you see Fear fire off a Thoughtseize. Collins did make land number 4, still holding onto that Field of Ruin as well.
This is kind of a bait, Thoughtseize here. I don't think Harlan actually has a good follow-up, but he does know Collins does have Cryptic Command, but Collins is just going to let this resolve because he doesn't want to just leave himself vulnerable to a powerful, like, 2 or 3 mana play.
Yeah, so we see the hand again. It's that Field of Ruin, that Mana Leak, that Cryptic Command, and then it's Jace the Mind Sculptor and Path to Exile.
Yeah, Harlan here does have another land to play for the turn, and it looks like a War of Invention. So his hope here was that Collins goes counter draw, and then he goes land, War of Invention for Dr. Foundry past turn. Hope that Collins doesn't find one of those answers for it. But the heads-up play from Collins just letting the Thoughtseize resolve, and now still has Mana Leak at the ready. Yes, he loses the Cryptic Command, but he doesn't lose the game.
So Cryptic Command's taken, Fear at 13 off the Thoughtseize, plays Pluto Delta and passes. We see Collins untap. 1 mana shy of Jace plus Mana Leak at this point. He'll play the Field of Ruin and attack with the Snapcaster, Fear to 11.
Arkham's Astrolabe secretly just doing a ton of work in these 4-color decks. I mean, in this spot, Harlan's able to cast Assassin's Trophy while never having to fetch up an actual green source of mana. And it's not like people are going to just, like, destroy your Arkham's Astrolabe, you know? It's already drawn a card. It's done 90% of the work that it's supposed to do already.
Yeah, definitely huge for enabling this 4-color heavy basic land mana base. See Fear casting a Goblin Engineer without Mana Leak mana to pay. Collins lets that resolve. Fear will put an Astrolabe in the graveyard.
Yeah, still just baiting. Has land plus War of Invention still at the ready. Trying to get Collins to tap out at some point. Put the shields down at some point.
Fear follows up with a tapped Watery Grave and passes the turn.
I would have liked to play one of these lands untapped just so Collins couldn't do something end of turn. Because if he did, that would put the shield down for just a second for the War of Invention. But playing the land untapped does kind of give it away.
Right. Fear's life total also not super comfortable.
That's true.
Collins thinking about some action on the end step here. Or, sorry, no, we're already to his turn. Hadn't drawn the card. That was the confusion. So now he draws for turn. And he'll attack with Snapcaster Mage.
Now Harlan here, if this Goblin Engineer gets untapped, he's going to start turning Astrolabes into other Astrolabes, which becomes a draw engine.
So there was no blocks. Fear went to 9. Now Collins has land number 6, another Field of Ruin. Jace the Mind Sculptor shows up, bounces the Engineer, and Collins has Mana Leak mana up.
What I would have liked to have seen Harlan maybe fire off an Assassin's Trophy during the end step, if only because it baits the mana leak. But now he can just whir here, pay for the mana leak, and potentially go off next turn. The mana leak doesn't really get him out of it. And he still has the Assassin's Trophy and can pay for it on the next turn, so.
Whir of Invention for X=2. Collins will opt in response. Looking for a Force of Negation, I suppose.
Yeah, it's basically the only card he can hit at this point. Nothing for 1 white mana actually does it.
The top card's giving him some pause. Lands on scrying it to the bottom. And now the Whir resolves.
Yeah, so here comes Sword of the Meek. At the very least, he's going to be able to fetch and create 3 Thopters, one of which can very easily block and just eat the Snapcaster Mage, while also providing him enough power to be able to handle the Jace the Mind Sculptor pretty easily.
Collins will start his turn brainstorming with the Jace. Kind of a lot of pressure to find Stony Silence, some way to break up this combo.
Yeah. I mean, even something like a Disenchant type effect would be okay, but Stony Silence is the fine, and that is a real good one.
So Fear's going to respond, cracking that fetch land. Finds Snow-Covered Island.
He does have the Assassin's Trophy in hand still, so he can get out from underneath the Stony Silence as long as Collins doesn't have a hard counterspell. He can even do it and pay for mana leak.
So 3 Thopters show up in response to the Silence, Fear to 11. Collins has Flooded Strand to reset after that Jace Brainstorm. Pass his turn. Fear is going to attack. Some Thopters coming at Jace, and I believe the Sword of the Meek one going at Collins.
Yeah, and there's the untapped green source here for Assassin's Trophy, but the Arkham's Astrolabe is locked down, and a Field of Ruin on the Breeding Pool plus a counterspell for the Assassin's Trophy might be too much.
So Fear shocked for the Breeding Pool is casting Assassin's Trophy. Collins is going to respond by sacrificing Flooded Strand, fetching to 14. Finds Basic Island. And that's blue source number 4 and mana number 5. What do you suppose this is?
I don't actually know.
Maybe reset the deck opt? No, just Cryptic Command, just has it. Counter draw.
Okay.
Shuffle away the bad one before you draw off the Cryptic.
Yeah. Gonna replay a Goblin Engineer. This is gonna be a mini draw engine. It's not overly powerful at the moment, and there's nothing he can really search up that can destroy the Stony Silence, you know. Couldn't go get something like Spine of Esau.
This time, the Engineer puts Ichor Wellspring in the graveyard.
Now he does have a second Assassin's Trophy in hand, but unfortunately, as long as Collins is heads up enough to just use Field Ruin on the Breeding Pool, I'm not seeing a second source of green mana here.
So here's an attack with the Snapcaster, Fear to 7, back on Collins' turn. See if he does what you said, but no. Field of Ruin did not target the Breeding Pool.
It probably means he has a combo of cards in hand that can actually deal with anything that Harlan could deploy.
It's an attempt at a Tezzeret Agent of Bolus. Spell Queller is going to catch that. And Harlan will pass. Upkeep. Assassin's Trophy.
Maybe he's going to draw step it. Maybe he's just not going to cast it.
Okay, yeah, he rewound that, not casting that. All right, so now we're kind of in a holding pattern.
Yeah, I mean, these Thopters are kind of holding off everything from Collins' side of things.
Now Assassin's Trophy, and that'll be caught by a second Spell Queller.
All right, another Goblin Engineer, though. That could be another draw engine, but again, as long as Collins knocks off the green source, there's not a whole lot of ways for Stony Silence to get unlocked here.
Pithing Needle put into the graveyard with the Engineer.
That one's an okay one. It can still work even under the Stony Silence, naming something like Jace the Mind Sculptor.
Fear's life total pretty low at 7. Collins has 2 Spell Quellers, but that one Thopter with the Sword of the Meek is holding that all off.
Yeah, I think even if he just had 3 Thopters, no sword, the triple block threat might be too much for Collins to attack into, because you lose the Spell Queller, and that gives him back an Assassin's Trophy, which can be very bad for you. Galvanic Blast here from Harlan would be really nice.
So Harlan is going to turn that Astrolabe into a Wellspring with the Engineer. Draws off that. One of the cards in hand is Mox Opal. I believe the other is another Thopter Foundry.
Yeah, neither are doing a whole lot right now. Here it comes finally.
Now the Field of Ruin takes care of Breeding Pool.
Harlan dangerously close to being out of basics. Not that it matters too much at this point.
Cullen's continuing with the basic land diversity, finds a white-bordered unglued island.
And another Field of Ruin here, and that is going to be it as far as basics are concerned. Harlan only has the 6 this weekend.
So Steam Vent's down as well. Well, Collins cannot answer that snow-covered mountain, so Fear will be able to activate that Engineer.
Yeah, and that allows him to draw cards. Unfortunately, though, most of his deck is shut down by Stony Silence. He needs to find Galvanic Blast. That'll take care of a Spell Queller, which can in turn cast the Assassin's Trophy. But here it is, Stoneforge Mystic, first time all match.
And so we have these Nick Miller Thopter tokens, which are colorless or whatever, but they're actually blue because of the Thopter Foundry. But Collins is going to go find Batterskull. That is more than enough to punch through this stuff over time. There is a Sword of Fire and Ice in the main deck as well, though. I suppose you can't equip it through Stony Silence, so that makes sense. Just get the Batterskull.
Yeah.
That's a two-sided effect.
Here is a big Urza, Lord High Artificer, and Construct. This is going to allow him... Now, here's a weird thing about Urza. The fast mana, tapping the artifact to gain a mana, is not the artifact gaining the ability. It's Urza's ability. So Stony Silence doesn't shut it down. That means that we can tap a bunch of artifacts here, activate Urza's ability, turn over the top card, try to find one of those Galvanic Blasts, or an Assassin's Trophy. So there's one of those left, I believe.
Finds Mishra's Bauble. That's a dud.
Yeah, but it's another mana. And eventually he's going to start being able to activate the Urza 2, 3, 4, 5 times a turn. As long as Collins doesn't have anything of consequence. Goblin Engineer also at the ready, can shut down Jace the Mind Sculptor.
And that Construct is huge. Players checking the stats on that. It's at 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Larger than the Germ token, anyway.
This might be a Path to Exile on the Sword of the Meek Thopter, and then a crash for a bunch of damage flying.
Yeah, getting the Quellers to connect is a lot easier than getting the Germ. So there goes that big Thopter. Harlan's been out of basics for a minute. We see the attack with the 2 Spell Quellers.
Yeah, and this is a 2-turn attack clock, so Harlan basically has 1 draw step left to find something to keep him in this game. But he has the Goblin Engineer. He can sack the Wellspring, draw a card, get back Astrolabe, draw another card. He has draw step for the turn. He has multiple activations of Urza.
Found Goblin Engineer and Tezzeret Agent of Bolus off of those 2 draws. But the Tezzeret cannot ultimate right away. That takes a full turn.
Galvanic Blast off the top.
Yeah, Galvanic Blast. Target Spell Queller. Get back my Assassin's Trophy.
Assassin's Trophy. Targeting the Assassin. Oh, the Stony Silence. And that's going to go infinite.
Harlan Fear.
Woo!
Takes down a barn burner against Austin Collins. The Azorius control deck, it looked like Collins was going to be able to win game 2, but Fear had just enough stuff, played it just right, and now advances to 10-2.
It looked like he was going to win game 3, too.
Right. Really impressive showing from the 4-color Warza deck there. And you got to hand it to Harlan Fear for sticking to his guns, not registering any Stoneforge Mystic, not messing with success.
Oh, yeah.
In line. Could be making top 8 of this event.
Yeah,
he's certainly within earshot of that.
He's got so much experience with this archetype already.